Hi everyone, welcome to Core Unit Launch Pod Sessions number 11. Wow, it's a long session streak now, and today we have the pleasure of being joined by Mr. Nick Kunkel and Marc-Andre, which I expect is going to be a really good presentation, or at least I'm really looking forward to this core unit and all the possibilities that come with it. So yeah, Nick, if you want to take it over and introduce yourself for those that don't know you that well.
Is that really anyone at this point? But okay.
Probably not in this call, but
Yeah, my name is Nicholas Kunkel. I'm currently the head of backend services and head of Oracles at the Maker Foundation. I've also been the Oracle domain team since the beginning of multi-collateral DAI, and trying to continue having a role in the DAO with the foundation winding down and looking to start this Oracle core unit. So let's kind of get right into it. So what is the mission of the Oracle core unit? Well, we want to make the most decentralized, secure, scalable, resilient, and transparent Oracle protocol that is purpose-built for MakerDAO, but available to everyone. And so talking about kind of like the motivation of like why do we need the Oracle core unit? It kind of boils down to kind of 4 core concepts, and those are security, scalability, flexibility, and opportunity. So I wanted to kind of touch on those briefly a little bit. So jumping into security, oracles are kind of this critical component of securing the Maker protocol, right? So when we talk about, is the Maker protocol secure? There are certain types of risks, right? There are smart contract risks, right? There's integration risks, but oracles are one of those risks that are kind of the Achilles heel, where if something goes wrong with them, there is a critical path that can be intercepted quite quickly to do something naughty, right? So if someone is able to manipulate the Oracle price in any way, it can result in the minting of unbacked DAI, and it can also result in the mass liquidation of what would otherwise be healthy vaults. So those are both scenarios that are quite concerning, right? Because they can effectively be used by an attacker for direct profit. And so ergo, you kind of have this property that if oracles are the security, are the kind of the fundamental of the security protocol, then by outsourcing oracles, you're effectively outsourcing the security of the Maker protocol. And so really what you arrive at is that the DAO really needs to own its own Oracle stack, and own the operation, the management, the maintenance thereof, in order to minimize the fundamental kind of attack surface on the Maker protocol. And so then we get to scalability, right? So oracles are also a critical component when it comes to scaling the Maker protocol. When you add a new collateral type, right, you need to price it in a secure and scalable way. This has probably kind of come to the forefront recently, right, where we've been talking about that the gas cost, right, to operate an Oracle for a year, right, is considerably large, right? And it's one of those problems where the gas costs currently are so significant that there are certain collateral types that are just not worth onboarding into the protocol at the moment because the projected stability fees that we would be earning in a year are less than the projected Oracle costs, right? And so making oracles that are, fundamentally, yes, fundamentally secure, but also fundamentally scalable, that they are kind of cost effective to run is also key in order for the Maker protocol to scale and to expand. You also kind of want to let's kind of take a look at the alternative, right? From a cost point of view, you really want to avoid vendor lock-in risk as well, right? So for those of you unfamiliar with vendor lock-in risk, right, it's traditionally when a company becomes dependent on another company for a service, and the other company basically just has all the leverage. They have complete control, and they can effectively just price gouge you at will. This is not a scenario that the DAO would like to find itself in. And so it's really behooves it to really have their own Oracle stack so they don't end up becoming dependent on this external party that can basically just like tithe you however much you want because there's no credible kind of alternatives. And so then we kind of get to the next point, which is can we leverage economies of scale, to reduce the marginal cost of oracles? And I think the answer there is yes. The Maker protocol is the largest, or at least one of the largest DeFi protocols in existence at the moment. And this trend is not going to kind of go away. Maker is kind of like Pac-Man, and it's just going to eat, all of the collateral, all of the collateral, all of the collateral. That's kind of its one kind of main goal. And as a function of that, we will be running an obscene amount of oracles, right? And so just by dog fooding our own kind of Oracle protocol, we are achieving basically economies of scale, right? Where it's almost like kind of like a company is kind of building their own hardware. For most companies don't build their own hardware, right? It's obscenely expensive. But one trend that we've noticed in the past couple of years with the big tech companies, with FANG, right, with Amazon, with Google, with Apple, is that they've actually achieved such a big scale in terms of their consumption of hardware that they've reached such a scale that it's actually worth it for them to design and manufacture hardware in-house rather than sourcing it externally, right? And I believe oracles is kind of the same thing here, where yes, individually oracles can be quite expensive, but once you hit a certain scale, these economies of scale kick in, and I think Maker is going to be at that point relatively quickly compared to other parties. And kind of the last point here is that if the DAO kind of owns its own Oracle protocol, then that protocol can kind of be fine-tuned specifically around the needs and requirements of the Maker protocol, right? So what Maker needs in an Oracle may or may not be the same as what another protocol needs in an Oracle, right? And trying to get a vendor to specifically craft a protocol around you, right? There may be some friction there, but with an in-house Oracle protocol, there's effectively quite aligned incentives, right? That if we can make something more efficient for the way that Maker consumes a price, or for the frequency of price updates that Maker needs a price, we can, right, turn up the frequency or turn down the frequency of price updates, right, to meet the cost threshold that the DAO is looking for.
Nick, I'm not sure if you're touching upon this topic later, like selling the Oracle services to other protocols, maybe. And if that's the case, how it's a bit the opposite question, like, right? Like, when do you decide that serving another project makes sense from the economic point of view? And then how many changes do you need to do to your own Oracle set, I guess, to do that?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm definitely going to be touching on that later
Nice.
in the presentation. So hold that thought, and I'll definitely be answering that. And so then we kind of get to the third point, which is flexibility, right? And this goes back to the mission, and what we just touched on is that this Oracle protocol is really purpose-built specifically around the needs of the Maker protocol. You end up having this tightly coupled kind of integration and communication workflow with the other core units. So instead of, say, being like, hey, external vendor, we need an Oracle for this, and we're trying to do collateral onboarding by in 2 weeks, or by the end of the month, right? The vendor may have other customers, right? The vendor may have competing priorities. The vendor just may be in a period, right, where they're catching up on some technical debt, or dealing with some fires, right? Having an in-house kind of Oracle protocol and core unit really kind of cuts through all that, right? In that we can work with the risk core unit, we can work with the smart contract core unit, we can work with the collateral onboarding core unit kind of directly to basically fast track things, which ultimately ends up in faster time to market. And as we can see, as we've seen in the past, right, time to market can be everything, right? Imagine if we had gotten the LP tokens out, months later, would we have seen the same traction? Probably not. Imagine if we had gotten the LP tokens out much earlier, we could have probably seen a lot more traction, right? We're coming out with Sushi LP tokens, right, in the next few weeks. Should we have perhaps pushed on that sooner? Maybe, who knows? But the point here is that having an Oracle core unit, right, gives you the ability to tap into that agile kind of workflow versus trying to coordinate on an external vendor's kind of workflow. The next part is that depending on what the priorities of the DAO are, we're quite willing to design bespoke mechanisms, right? So I think the LP tokens are an example of this, right? Where the generalized Oracle protocol was not a good fit for pricing LP tokens. And so, we ended up creating, a bespoke kind of LP Oracle, right, contract that fit this much better. And so, since our incentives are essentially aligned with the DAOs, we're quite willing to, prioritize these bespoke types of mechanisms when they come our way, and when the DAO really says, like, no, like, this is super high priority, right, for the health of the Maker protocol. And that leads me into the last one, and this one's kind of a big one. It's opportunity. There is and I want to choose my words carefully here, but there is a big opportunity here for productizing oracles and offering oracles as a service. Okay, so Maker kind of has this strategic advantage over competing Oracle protocols. They're kind of they're a little bit hard to describe. So let me try to briefly touch on them. One is the association with the Maker brand. Any Oracle protocol that can say, hey, we're used by Maker, right? That gives you instant credibility, right? Especially when you look at how long Maker has been around, right? How many assets Maker has under it, and with this assumption that, right, the amount of assets in Maker is just going to blow up, right? You know, orders of magnitude more. That means something. It's very different for an upstart Oracle protocol, right, to go raise some VC money and start convincing, you know, the DeFi majors, hey, you know, you should use this new novel Oracle that we created. So this association with Maker, the brand, this utilization in Maker, this history and reputation that we've built up as just being experts in the Oracle field is kind of extremely valuable. And it's not something that money can buy. It's only something that you earn over time. And so we should monetize that reputation. We should monetize that brand. And an Oracle product, kind of an Oracle service product, allows us to do that. Right? There's also a positive feedback loop here with economies of scale, right? If we're spending, you know, X amount on an Oracle anyway every year, right, just to support a collateral type, the more external parties we can get to use that Oracle and start paying for that Oracle, the more we either A, subsidize our own costs, or B, actually start generating profit, right, on top of our costs. The other thing I want to kind of mention is that there's really room for more than one single Oracle protocol. I don't think this is going to be some kind of winner takes all market. I think there is a kind of maturity kind of process that DeFi is currently undergoing and will kind of continue to go through over the years. And yeah, right now it's all about, right, crazy growth and innovation. But eventually, and you know, I say this in the least derogatory way, but eventually the bean counters are going to take over. And what the bean counters care about is risk. And it's going to be all about de-risking, right? We're taking too much risk. We need to take less risk. And one of the areas that they're going to focus on is Oracle risk. It will eventually, and this is kind of my vision, it will eventually be irresponsible for any protocol to be exclusively dependent on a single Oracle protocol. It doesn't make any sense for someone to take on that type of existential risk. You know, we've talked about how much of an Achilles heel Oracle protocols can be to DeFi, especially, and so eventually it will just make sense to use multiple Oracle protocols. You know, either in conjunction together at the same time, or one is a primary and one is a fallback, or even, you know, more than two. Just as a function of good risk management. And I think in that type of world, I think we can thrive because, yeah, we are not the most popular Oracle protocol right now, but from a technology point, we're right up there. And I think that when the shift towards risk reduction happens, I think we'll be very well positioned to take advantage of it. Now with that, I want to start talking about the strategic direction that we want to take for Oracle's as a product. I think that I think that trying to compete with external Oracle protocols, right, that are significantly better funded than us in a direct way is probably not the best way to go about it, because it really quickly becomes a battle of attrition. And a battle of attrition is not one that we are either A, likely to win, or B, would lead to kind of maximum kind of expected value and return for bang on our buck. And so instead, I want to, I'd like to say that there are really two strategic imperatives here that I think that we can perform very well in, regardless of what our competitors do and regardless of the difference in funding between ourselves and our competitors. And the first one is real world assets. And the second one is layer two. And I want to get into both of those kind of individually on why those are kind of the strategic imperatives that we want to target. So starting with real world assets, the business model here quickly becomes, well, Maker kind of has this very natural moat around real world assets. And this natural moat really comes down to the fact that we have no cost of capital, right? We have effectively zero cost of capital because we are the primary issuer of DAI. And we can just, mint DAI out of thin air, versus secondary lenders, right, need to source stablecoin liquidity, right, first before they can re-lend it, right, to a real world asset originator. And so that that difference in the cost of capital, right, is effectively what gives Maker its moat around real world assets. It's that if you want to borrow $500 million or $1 billion, Maker is conceivably the only protocol that allows you to do that. There's not going to be enough liquidity on other platforms to take that without hugely impacting the rates on those platforms. And so Maker, in my mind, is really just the force to be reckoned with here, where real world asset originators are going to be flocking to us because of this unique service that only we can provide. And so I also want to combine this with the fact that I believe, and I believe that many other in the Maker ecosystem and community kind of share this vision, is that real world asset are quickly going to snowball and kind of become the dominant kind of part of the collateral portfolio over time. I would be quite surprised if, within 3 years, real world assets are not at least 50% of the collateral portfolio. There is an enormous amount of money, or should I say assets, kind of sitting on the sidelines. And once we kind of figure out our kind of cookie cutter formula, that our legal infrastructure, our process driven infrastructure, right, for onboarding, our infrastructure for liquidating, right, our kind of penalty mechanisms for chasing bad actors. Once we have figured out and hit the magic sauce like this, it can scale incredibly quickly. And so I'm basing my vision of the Oracle protocol and how and what kind of world it's going to be operating in, based off of how I believe, from my experience, the Maker protocol is going to evolve and look in the coming years. And so you have these right, this hugely expansive real world asset portfolio. You have this service that maker can offer to real world asset originators that only we can offer. And oracles quickly become a kind of pay to play part of that model, right? If you want your real world asset onboarded into the maker protocol, you need to pay us for oracles. That is the business model here, right? You are passing on the oracle costs to those that are going to benefit from the asset being onboarded into the maker protocol, and those are the asset originators. Given the scale at which these real world asset deals are expected to be in no short order, which is greater than 100 million a piece, and at some point, $500 million and even $1 billion a piece. The oracle costs, even if they are quite high by today's standards, quickly don't become that significant anymore. Like, imagine on a $500 million loan, if we're just charging $1 million a year in Oracle fees, and that is a continuous charge, right? That we charge every year as a recurring charge. That's almost pure profit, and it's pure profit for a couple of reasons, right? Real world assets tend to be quite illiquid. And so the frequency of price updates is exponentially lower than something like, say, Ethereum, right? Where we're updating it, on average, basically every, 30, 40 minutes, right? And so because of those, because the frequency of those updates, because of the liquidity that RWA expected to have, the Oracle costs, the cost to operate that Oracle, at least from a on-chain transaction perspective, those just basically converge to zero. They basically converge to being quite insignificant. Now, that being said, the off-chain component of how do we obtain and validate and audit the prices before they are submitted on chain. That is an infrastructure that we still need to set up, and there are going to be costs associated with that, right? You could imagine an auditor or even multiple auditors, right, perusing the financials of a real world asset, right, and verifying that everything is correct and essentially coming up with a price or validating a price that they've been given with respect to that data. And that's going to be kind of a really important service that needs to happen from a security of the protocol point of view. And those costs could be significant, but I don't think that those costs are going to be as big as the gas costs have trended to be, right? Where they're just all kind of consuming. I think those costs can be bounded kind of quite well. And so what I really see is that this real world asset kind of business is going to be quite high margin. It's quite high margin for the asset originators themselves. If you look at, for example, I have a friend who works at Citi, right? And essentially what he'll do is they have institutional demand for a fixed income kind of product. And so what they'll do is they'll spend a month, buying up a bunch of bonds and constructing this fixed income kind of financial products, right? To the kind of exact demand that they see out in the world from their clients. And the margins on this stuff are actually pretty huge. On securitization, they have around like 5%, 6% margins. So the margins of our real world asset kind of originators are quite large. And because they're large, and because we have this mode of pay to play, I believe that the margins for real world asset kind of based oracles can be quite healthy as well. We can basically take a big bite out of that. Now, how we end up pricing and is still kind of a question that's up for debate. I believe that one of the variables should definitely be the die supply, right? How in terms of how much is expected to be like what is the debt ceiling of this this real world asset, right? So on $1 billion real world asset, we should expect to make more on the Oracle than we do on $100 million real world asset, than we would on a $10 million real world asset. We may even, have different costs associated with each of those, right? Maybe on a $10 million real world asset, we're fine with just having one auditor, review financials, versus on $1 billion real world asset, we may want three, we may want even more, right? So our costs may not even be fixed on our end. And so we should be quite dynamic in how we price and how we segment our customers, right? But I do believe that the amount that is being borrowed, and that is to say the debt ceiling, not the actual amount, but the debt ceiling that this line of credit that we've extended should be a key factor in pricing. Whoops. And then let's talk about the second area that I think looks quite promising, and that is layer two. Right, so layer two has kind of become this meme in the community, right? That's going to solve the scaling problems, right? In both in the short and medium term of Ethereum, right? And we are right now witnessing the introduction of a handful of layer twos, and I do expect that there's going to be quite a few more, right? And when I say layer two, I'm talking about things like optimistic rollups. I'm talking about things like zero knowledge rollups and kind of all of the hybrids in between, right? There's ZK Sync, there's Arbitrum, there's Starkware, there's Optimism. There is all kinds of these layer twos. But there's even some non-layer twos that like to call themselves layer twos, like Matic, for instance, right? Isn't that a exercise in creative marketing? But anyways, that aside, the general thing though is that on layer one, the oracles and the performance of the oracles, right? The accuracy of the oracle is heavily linked to the costs of running the oracle, right? We update our Ethereum oracle on every 0.5% spread, right? So every time the price changes by 0.5%, we update the oracle. Yet for things like for other collateral types that are not as widely used, like ZRX or like KNC, we actually only update on a 4% spread, right? And this is because the costs that we, the revenue that we generate, the stability fees that we generate from those ilks, from those collateral types, are just completely eclipsed by what the oracle costs would be if we didn't just reduce the update frequency to this 4% kind of spread. And that's the trade-off that we've had to make on layer one, right? Even for customers, right? I mean, right now, we are giving oracles away for free to customers, but when we start charging, how much do you think customers can afford to pay for oracles? Many of these protocols have, either not found product market fit, or if they have not managed to monetize it quite as effectively. And so, although for their use case, they may need oracles that are, update on a 0.5% tick, they can't afford them. And quite frankly, neither can we. And if us as the largest DeFi protocol can't afford it, already, we can't expect the minnows and the upstarts to be able to. And so there's a big problem there from how do you generate a kind of a profitable Oracle business on layer one. It's really tricky. But on layer two, it's a whole different ballgame, right? On layer two, the transaction costs are so much cheaper than L1 that they pretty much just converge to nothing again. And this kind of completely changes the game, right? Because you don't have this trade-off anymore of cost to, how accurate or how secure is this Oracle, right? You don't have to, you don't have that trilemma of, do you optimize for cost? Do you optimize for the most security? Do you optimize for the least latency? You can have it all, right? And so it's expected that many DeFi protocols are either going to migrate to layer two or just redeploy on layer two in parallel, or even that, new kind of protocols that would never have worked on layer one because they were kind of cost prohibitive, kind of flourish organically on layer two. And so this is a really big opportunity from an Oracle's business point of view, because we kind of see that this is the way that things are trending, and that the migration to layer two is happening and is going to happen in mass, and that we can offer this service that everyone needs, and this service costs us almost nothing to run. So it's almost pure profit. So that looks quite attractive from a business point of view. We then look at the fact that the Oracle protocol as it is today, the way we've architected it, the way we've designed it, it's already blockchain agnostic. We already, run price oracles on Starkware today, and it is not difficult to implement. And the reason it's not difficult to implement is because nothing is dependent on Ethereum. Nothing assumes that, Oracle related things are Ethereum related things. The only part of the Oracle protocol that actually touches Ethereum is the very last step where you send the transaction to the Oracle smart contract. And that makes it incredibly adaptable, right? To basically push those Oracle prices to other blockchains, right? You essentially only have to, especially if they support the EVM, right, which is the Ethereum virtual machine. It effectively just means you just have to redeploy the same Oracle smart contract on this other blockchain, and the only difference is that the relayer that's pushing this price update, instead of pointing to an Ethereum RPC node, it just has to point to, an Optimism RPC node or an Arbitrum RPC node or a Starkware RPC node. That's the only difference here. And so we are incredibly flexible in how quickly we can onboard all of the L2s in the coming months. And that is a great job by the team, that we are at the point that we can kind of seize on this opportunity. Yeah, so going to the third point here, I think we briefly covered this earlier, right? Our better funded competitors that can, bleed us dry on L1, they don't have that advantage on L2. There's no, you can say maybe that there's a cost of attrition with marketing dollars, but I really like this this much more level playing field that we have on layer two. The also added advantage is that, right, everyone that's migrating over, right, will need an Oracle solution and will be looking for an Oracle solution. It's much easier to convince someone who's looking for a solution to sell it to them than it is for someone who already has a solution. and isn't really looking to replace it. And then you have this uphill battle of trying to convince them that what they have is not as good as what you're offering, right? When no one has a current solution, that's when it's a much more level playing field between us and the other Oracle protocols that are out there. Okay, so with that kind of out of the way, I want to talk about what the mandate is of the Oracle protocol. What are the things that we're going to be kind of responsible for, and it's quite extensive. I'm not going to lie. So obviously the first one is developing and maintaining this Oracle protocol, right? There are clients that have become really complex over the years. Oracle clients, feed clients, relayer clients that transport layer mechanisms like libp2p, like Scuttlebutt. The Oracle core unit is going to be responsible for designing, developing, and maintaining this protocol. Optimizing the crap out of it to be highly performant, to have the lowest cost for that performance, making it incredibly resilient through just redundancy and redundancy over redundancy, right? Where if any individual component fails, it should have no effect on the operation of the protocol. If even certain combinations of components fail, there should still be a happy path, right, for a fully functioning Oracle network, and essentially mitigating any kind of centralized point of failure that we find. We're also going to be responsible for doing research. I think that this is something that MakerDAO kind of had a lot of back in the day, and it really enabled us to be in this privileged position that we are today, and that we had a very significant amount of our funding put into research. And that research, didn't just help Maker move forward, but it helped the entire ecosystem make, this order of magnitude kind of shift forward. And I think we've neglected that the past year or two in the foundation. And I think that this is something that we need to bring back, that we kind of have researchers who are just exclusively focused on research and not kind of doing this context shifting and between working on the product, going back to doing research, being distracted by something else, going back to doing research. I think we just need dedicated kind of research, working on kind of next gen Oracle architectures. The third thing we'll be covering is all of the Oracle responsibilities related to collateral onboarding, as we've been doing since the beginning of the multi-collateral DAI, and right under the auspice of the Oracle domain team. We're also going to be creating all of the Oracle releases, planning those releases, and executing those releases, right? So when smart contracts need to be updated, when feed clients need to be updated, right? These are pretty extensive, events, right? When you're kind of in a system that is working in real time, when you are actively, taking pieces out and shoving new pieces in, right? It's a very delicate process, and so I think you need to have a core unit like us handling that type of sensitive scenarios. Okay. When it comes to light feeds, right? You need someone who's going to be trying to scout out potential partners, recruiting them, persuading them, reviewing those light feed proposals, and essentially, submitting the polling and executive votes for those. We'll handle that responsibility as well. We want to drastically increase the transparency of the Oracle protocol. So right now, we have internal kind of dashboards that monitor, every single detail of the Oracle protocol, but we'd like to make it much more thorough, and we'd like to make it much more transparent in a public manner. And so one focus is going to be creating this kind of Oracle dashboard that displays all of the Oracle metrics kind of in real time, right? So everyone can kind of see how performant they are, and everyone can kind of see, how trustworthy they are as well, right? How well they're performing. In terms of Oracle monitoring, Oracle's as a system is one of those things that needs to be constantly monitored. I don't know if you've ever been on a call and heard my phone go off with some, wailing alarm. Yeah, that is kind of our internal monitoring setup that is constantly tracking every single price that a feed submits, every single price that an Oracle kind of receives, every single price discrepancy between any of those prices and what we perceive to be the market price. These are all things that we're tracking. Anytime any kind of administrative action is called on an Oracle smart contract, right? We have an alert. So these are things that we want to monitor both internally as well as externally through something like the Tech Ops Core Unit. We also, we touched on this real world asset Oracle, so we want to be responsible for designing and implementing that. Documentation, we want to generate and maintain all documentation related to the oracles, whether that be technical documentation, whether that be documentation describing the governance processes for onboarding, or just general information about the oracle's product. Right, we touched on creating this Oracles as a service product offering for layer 2, right? We want to design and implement and maintain that. We want to develop kind of our own brand around the oracles. It can't just be, the Oracle protocol or Maker's oracles or something. I think if you want this to succeed, it needs to really have its own kind of brand presence, and we can talk at a later date, what that branding is going to look like. But we also then want to be responsible kind of in-house for marketing that brand and for pushing our kind of message of product offerings through a variety of mediums. So we don't want to be dependent on, an external or a kind of marketing core unit, right, which is going to have various competing priorities, within the DAO for marketing. We'd like to do the Oracle related marketing in-house. And last is, and I didn't touch on this earlier, but I want to create this kind of centralized, decentralized Oracle hybrid, to where the goal is to reduce the deployment time. And so what do I mean by that? Well, one of the complaints we've had from customers is that when they want an Oracle, they want the turnaround time to just be like that. The fact that we have, we spend a week on, developing and testing, the fact that we then have to do a feed upgrade, right, which can take another week, the fact that we have to do a governance vote, all of this latency between when the customer wants an Oracle and when they actually get it is really destroying us right now in terms of customer adoption. So what we want to do is we want to be able to turn around an Oracle within 48 hours of a customer demanding it. So how do you do that, right? Well, this is what this centralized, decentralized Oracle hybrid is. It is essentially an Oracle that starts off as centralized and just becomes decentralized over time. So instead of using the DAO, appointed feeds, right, we would just spin up, feeds internally in the Oracle core unit, and those would be the feeds, right? And so we avoid this whole pain process of, okay, well, we have to, tell the feeds to update and then, wait a few days for all of them to update before we have quorum, right? Like, no, we just have instant quorum because it's just us internally just spinning up a node, right? Same thing with the governance process. We would want to have permission from governance to just deploy oracles on behalf of the DAO using our centralized feeds with the explicit understanding that, in the following governance cycle, that Oracle, becomes decentralized by replacing the Oracle core unit centralized feeds with the Maker protocol decentralized feeds, and that the ownership of the Oracle contract then gets flipped over from the Oracle core unit to the Maker protocol, right? So it's this getting the customer the Oracle that they want immediately, with the caveat that, hey, it's not really decentralized, from the get-go. But if we're being honest, they don't really care. For them, it's like, oh, there's this new shitcoin called, XYZ, and people are farming with it, and they want to, they want to reduce their downside, and so they want to be able to hedge their shitcoin exposure with a perp. And so we need to get this perp up within 24 hours of this token launching, right? That's a real conversation that I've had, and this type of model enables us to serve those types of customers. Okay, so let's talk about money. Let's talk about budget, because we should all scrutinize budgets and make sure that we are one, adequately funding core units for what they're trying to do, but also be not overfunding core units for what they're trying to do. So I'll try to move this little box around here so you guys don't get blocked. So the total budget that we are annual budget that we're looking for is just over 5 million. You can kind of see the cost breakdown here. So this budget allocates for 15 and a half full-time employees, right? So 15 full-time employees and one part-time employee. That part of the budget comes out to 2.5 million. In order to account for other costs like taxes, like benefits, and the like associated with employing employees, we've just put a multiplier on that base salary, and that's how we arrived at the total employee cost. We also have the feed stipends, right? So every month, feeds are paid. Currently it's 1,000 DAI, right? So, and we have, I believe, 20. Argonda, correct me if I'm wrong, we have 25 or 26 feeds?
26.
26, yeah. Okay, good man. This is why we have Mark. He knows everything. We have 26 feeds, right? So it's 26,000 DAI a month, right? And as the scale of the Maker protocol expands, we probably want to extend and increase the validator set, right? So we want to increase the amount of light feeds, right? Because that essentially provides more security the more feeds you have. So we've allocated budget, to cover both the current costs of paying light feeds, but also the anticipated cost of onboarding more light feeds over the next year. we have $300,000 allocated to what will likely be, for the most part, recruitment. I apologize for misspelling referral, and sign-on bonuses. Right, I'm concerned that we are not, if we kind of go the traditional way that hiring goes in this industry, is where you go to kind of cryptocurrency conferences and hackathons and you meet some promising candidates, or someone hacks on your protocol, right, and you're like, oh, that guy knows his stuff, right, and then you hire him. If I try to do all the hiring like that, it will be cheap, but it will take forever and a day to spin up this team. And so being able to utilize recruiters who demand heavy fees based off of the salary of the person that they're employing, being able to pay out referrals both internally to our current employees, but also to our networks, right? Where we all have extensive networks in the cryptocurrency industry, and being able to pay out referrals to those to get the exact right talent that we want. Being able to pay out significant signing bonuses to people who are on the edge about joining us versus joining a different protocol. We want to have that flexibility, and we think kind of 300,000 is kind of the something that will get us a long way to building the exact kind of team that we want to build. And really, this is like a one-time kind of cost, right? You don't have to keep paying recruiters after the one-time payment. You don't pay referrals are a one-time payment, right? Sign-on bonuses are a one-time payment. So we kind of expect that to drop off in subsequent budgets. Audits, right? We have quite a few product offerings that are going to need to be audited. Audits are quite expensive, right? Especially from the top firms, say like Trail of Bits, or Chainalysis. We have travel costs, right? Those are those actually encompass quite a bit. So those are, for example, from a business development point of view of meeting with clients. Those are for things like bringing employees to cryptocurrency conferences, right, where they can showcase our product, where we can do BD there, or we can kind of affiliate ourselves with hackathons and kind of sponsor things. Those are for team offsites, right? For a remote type of team, offsites are kind of critically important for people to get to meet each other and build like a sense of trust, build a sense of community. That's also going to help with retention. When people feel like they're connected like a family to their coworkers, they're also going to be much more likely to stay longer, right? So I think it's a significant amount of budget allocated to travel, but ultimately I think it more than makes up for itself in terms of the in terms of the retention. Production coverage, right? We talked about this earlier, that internal monitoring and external monitoring. It's prohibitively expensive for us to have 24/7 coverage for the Oracle protocol inside the Oracle core unit. Right? We would need, one DevOps person in every single time zone, plus redundancies. Just for the Oracles alone, that's just a non-starter in terms of costs, right? Over half of our team would just be DevOps. But TechOps is already has that coverage, already has those employees, and is doing monitoring for not just the Oracles, but for the entire Maker protocol. So we will outsource the 24/7 coverage over to the TechOps core unit. And so this budget is what we estimate TechOps is going to charge us on an annual basis for what we want them to do. Legal fees, right? Associated both with getting the business structure up and running, as well as the ongoing legal complications that anything involving crypto always has. And it's always the really expensive law firms that are the only ones that seem to be qualified to give answers to. Legal is a significant part of the budget. Anyways, I'm just gonna. I feel like I'm taking a lot of time on this, so I'm just gonna kind of skip the rest of them because the costs kind of start to become quite small here, right? Marketing, yeah, what we're going to spend on branding, on getting our name out there, on sponsoring conferences, on maybe even paying for some high profile integrations or subsidizing them. Yeah, so really we're looking at $500,000. I actually think that in the first year, we will spend significantly less than this. I would be surprised if we even spent half. But I wanted to kind of paint this picture of that going forward. This is what the budget of the Oracle core unit is really going to look like. And so what I did not want to do is ask for half of this amount now, and then a year from now, ask for double and kind of have people have sticker shock or something. So I would rather be very upfront that, yeah, because it's going to take us a while to spin up to the full scale that we're envisioning, which is what this budget kind of is priced for. We won't spend that in the first year, but going forward, this is what a normal Oracle core unit annual budget is going to look like. So this is the same kind of data as before, just in kind of pie chart form, so you can kind of see what the distribution is. As you can see, right, the cost of employees is really where most of the money is going. And then we have kind of MKR vesting. And so we're kind of using the model that was proposed by SES with kind of minor modifications. So it's basically the maximum of this 2.45 weighting, and this was one of the modifications we made. We raised this. Oh, sorry, actually, that's not one of the modifications we made. Sorry, this is the same weighting as SES, multiplied by the gross salary of the individual minus 275,000, and comparing that number with this weight down here, 0.35. Excuse me. And this 0.35 is the minor modification that we made on the SES model, which I think I think I saw that you guys even adopted this change, and it effectively just rewards, it raises the floor of more junior contributors in terms of the amount of that more junior members will receive compared to the original model. And so that's going to be the dollar value of the incentive that people should receive in MKR, and then that is translated into the amount of MKR by using the 6-month trailing average at the first date of employment. So you'll just take the historical average price of MKR over those 6 months. And if you look at the forum post, I linked to a website that will show you the average price over any time period. And so I put in an example of what the last trailing 6-month prices has been and how that translates to an MKR amount. So here are just some more of the details, right? So we talked about this, right? The MKR amount is the incentive value in dollars over this locked in trailing 6-month average price. We're doing a vesting period of 4 years, a cliff vest of 12 months. After the cliff has expired, employees will be issued MKR, distributed MKR twice a year, every January 1st and every July 1st. So it's not on a kind of rolling or continuous basis. This is an event that we just do twice a year. In order to protect kind of employees that join during a bull run and then kind of would otherwise get screwed on the MKR price during a bear run. We're allowing people to do what's called a manual repricing. Essentially, at any point in time, they can take the new 6-month trailing average MKR price and use that as their new MKR lock-in price, with the caveat that it resets the cliff vest, right? So you would have to wait at least 12 months before you would be distributed any more MKR. Also, we have an auto renewal, which means that after this 4-year period, the MKR USD price is recalculated, right? And it's renewed for another vesting period. So the maximum, and this is an estimate, and this is actually probably quite an extreme estimate on the high side, is what is the maximum total MKR that this core unit would need after 1 year, given the model that the algorithm model that we proposed earlier. It would be 1,051 MKR if all 15.5 employees use the 6-month trailing average price from the day that the proposal was submitted. Now, obviously, that's not going to be the case because, as I said earlier, it's going to take us a while to do the hiring. And if you expect the MKR price to trend up, then the amount of MKR that we would need would be considerably lower. But again, I want to err on the high side so that there are no big kind of surprises and at least negative surprises, and there can only be kind of pleasant surprises of, oh, we only had to spend 2/3 of that or something, right? The 4-year estimated max, right, is just the 1 year multiplied by 4. But again, we don't expect it to actually end up being that high. Okay, questions?
I have one if no one else has one yet. Is that okay?
Go ahead.
So I guess my question is, let's assume everything goes great. Your grand vision is fulfilled. You have a sprawling Oracle empire here, with outside customers and other product lines, and your own branding. So what happens when the Oracle CU is making more money than it needs to run, like when it's turning a profit in and of itself? Is the idea to like spin it off and just be an affiliated business to still be maintained under maker control? Just curious as to like thinking ahead 5 years down the road, like, do you still want to be tied to maker? And if not, like, how does that spin off look?
So I think the incentive alignment of being tied to maker are actually quite strong. So I think that this, as a, there will be, a real world, company, right, that's doing all this stuff. But I think it can operate as part of the DAO quite effectively. And if we find at some point that that's not the case, right, we can come to some arrangement with the community. But the idea is that, right, all of this money that is being generated from, the Oracle protocol, right, from, serving these customers, these Oracle services, that all of that money is funneled back into the DAO, right? We don't keep that money, right? We're not, being funded by the DAO and then, privatizing, our profits to ourselves. That's not how we envision this. We envision that the protocol, the DAO is funding this. The DAO owns the protocol itself. Like, we don't have ownership over like administrative ownership over the Oracle protocol. The DAO owns it. We can operate pieces of the Oracle protocol on behalf of the DAO. But even from a legal liability point of view, we don't want to have ultimate ownership, because that just makes us a target for potentially for regulators, right? And for other kind of state actors. We don't want to be able to, we want to not be able to be in the position where someone asks us to do something that is destructive to the Oracle protocol and that we are even capable of doing that. We want to be able to say, we can't, not we won't, in the words of Andreas Antonopoulos. Right, because
okay, thank you so much.
Can't gives you, it starts to become an obligation to act. Won't, is you start to have some obligation to act versus can't is, shrug, there's what do you want me to do, right?
Nick, how the real world assets Oracle work? I don't know if you have thought about the procedure or the process or the steps. Does someone need to check the price and then submit it through a UI that potentially you give them, or is there something that I'm missing?
So that's still kind of in the R&D phase, and it will really depend on how tech savvy or what lengths auditors are willing to kind of go to. In an ideal world, right, we would have auditors just run a kind of software client, right, where they just have some UX, right, and they just do their, they just click on it and click like sign, and maybe they have to put in their key or point to a path where their key is, right, and it'll then just sign some data or sign some message on behalf of the auditor, right, and then we can essentially use that signature, right, as a proof that the auditor has reviewed this and verified this. Ideally, that's the type of mechanism that we want to use. Now, whether that's how the auditors want to play ball, right? That's another question. And so we're going to be quite flexible on this at the beginning, and I think it's really like an iterative type of approach. I don't think it's just you come up with one, you lock yourself in a closet and come up with a genius design and like it magically works for everything. I think that it's one of those things where after we start onboarding real world assets, in bulk, we start to, identify commonalities between, their, not just their structure, but how they function, and how, what kind of data we have access to, and what they report and how they report it. And I think it's kind of one of those crawl, walk, run type of things. I think is how Matthew Rabinowitz would describe it, where I don't think you come out with the home run winner right away. I think it's just you come up with something that just iteratively improves on the previous iteration. And I know that's not a very concrete answer, but it's that's kind of the state that real world assets find themselves right now, right? Where Success is using a completely different model, right, than Centrifuge is using. And you can imagine that Real World Asset Co. from Greg DePrisco, right, might even use a different model than that, right? And so until we have some kind of standardization around what a properly packaged real world asset looks like, it becomes exceedingly difficult to try to guess what a generalized real world asset Oracle would look like as well.
Nice. Yeah, it's fair to answer like that. I think the whole thing it's a very nascent state. So, and the other question I had regarding the pricing, I think that a lot of projects right now are using the oracles for free. Is there a plan on charging like a percentage, I don't know, of the revenue at some point, or have you thought about the pricing models at all, or it's something also in R&D?
Yep. So we've definitely been looking at pricing in terms of right. You have to look at kind of a couple different things, right? One is the gas cost. The other is the update frequency. Is this like a 0.5% spread Oracle? Is it a 1% spread Oracle? Is it a 4% spread Oracle? Because those all affect our kind of costs to operate, right? And then you have to kind of price in your margin, right? And perhaps you want to have margin and be profitable right away. That's one way of looking at it. Maybe the other way of looking at it is you just want to charge enough to subsidize your own costs to run this thing, and you don't want to make any profit on it because you'd rather just gobble up kind of market share and be able to say, hey, we have 10 customers, 50 customers, 100 customers, right? Maybe we're willing to subsidize a lot of the operation costs, right? In order to kind of snowball that market share. So those are all kind of things we're looking at. Essentially, what I want to be able to do is just publish like a kind of heat map to the community and to customers, where essentially before they even come to us asking for an Oracle, they would know exactly, be able to identify exactly how much we would be charging them. And basically making Oracle kind of costs like deterministic to an extent.
Looking forward to it. Any questions from the public?
Yes. Hey, Nick. Circling back to Juan's question at the beginning of your presentation, but I kind of had a different question. It was similar, but when it comes to business development, right, and selling OAAS, Oracles as a Service, to companies or protocols, et cetera, is that something you're going to lean on the business development team, or is that something where you're going to have your own team and they're going to go after the type of clientele that you want? I mean, how are you thinking about that?
So I think I don't think it should be one or the other. I kind of think it should be both, right? Nadia and the growth core unit, are going to probably, their entire job is, right, getting their face in front of customers, right, and telling customers about all the different product offerings we have. So I think that through that funnel, we can get a lot of business. But I also think it kind of behooves us to have at least some BD internally, right? Because we need dedicated kind of BD as well. We need someone that, completely understands every inch and detail of our kind of product and, how it relates to our competitors and how you, sell this. And I think that you definitely need some of that in-house. You need some of that strategy in-house. You need someone kind of prioritizing that as their number one priority rather than their, a number 4 or 5, right? Because, for the growth core unit, I can't imagine that, okay, getting Oracle customers is super high on the list compared to, finding the next, real world asset originator that's going to generate, $1 billion, right? So we definitely want to lean on what's available in the DAO within the core units, but we do want some internal business development as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And real quickly, so there's going to be incubation of other core units that could possibly play in the sandbox well with other established core units. And what's your feeling on having another, I don't know, maybe, and this might sound crazy, but maybe have some guy who's out there doing Oracle pricing for Coinbase spin out on his own and say, hey, I want to join the maker community and I want to start my own Oracle's core unit. What's your take on that? Is that possible? Because personally, I don't see it, that it could work. Same thing with PE, but that's just my personal opinion. I just wanted to hear your take on it.
So I still think that it can work, but I think that there needs to be some kind of delegation of responsibilities, right? So for something like collateral onboarding, I think that part in particular, right, lends itself quite well to, okay, well, there can be multiple Oracle core units, right, that are doing kind of collateral onboarding in parallel, right? If you think that the bandwidth of my core unit is going to be, so high with developing the protocol, right? That we that we don't have enough resources, that we can devote in parallel to collateral onboarding, right? So that's kind of just like one example, right? We could have one Oracle core unit that's maybe more on the, and I think this was kind of your point just now, on the data modeling side, right? So how do you price something, right? That's almost like something that a traditional bank does, right? Is they have like some internal department that's just figuring out how to price things, right? That's not even a technology kind of problem anymore. And while I certainly don't want my core unit to be exclusively just focused on technology and have that be its only competency, I can definitely see the value in there being another core unit that's exclusively just full of some like econ finance whiz kids that are just really good at pricing this stuff, right? So I definitely, while I think in terms of the mandate that I put for my core unit is pretty all encompassing and pretty wide in terms of its bandwidth, I kind of did that because if I don't, then these are things that are just being left on the table that no one is doing. It definitely does not, exclude the possibility of another core unit spinning up in the future and taking over, some or a multiple of those responsibilities.
Awesome, man. Thanks for the answer. Appreciate that.
If you still have time, I've got a quick question about like L2 stuff. I know we've been working pretty extensively with Starkware. Are there like maker projects we would need to start testing out more infrastructure on L2, or are you looking for clients? I mean, Eurodai comes to mind in terms of things that have been proposed that might be a good fit for it.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, we already support Starkware, right? So any client that is running on Starkware or is going to run on Starkware and wants oracles from us, yeah, forward those people our way. I'm aware of a couple of them, but if you totally may have a more expansive network than I do, so please, yeah, forward them my way, and I'm more than happy to talk to them. I think we can get them up and running quite quickly.
Awesome to hear.
Yeah. And I haven't been able to look at the chat, so if there's a bunch of questions in the chat, Juan, if you can just start asking those, I'll be happy to answer those.
No, I think it's we're fine. Go ahead, Taylor.
I had one final one question about hiring and growth. I've supported the team from Maker with recruiting on and off as an external recruiter until recently, and now this opportunity to form a talent core unit came up, and it got me super excited and interested. You've mentioned that some of your growth plans are to reach 15 people within the next year, and I've also saw that you have a budget allocated for recruiting and referral fees. One question on our side as well was, should we have the model behind the talent CU subsidized by the DAO or the SES or the governance core unit, or should we also consider a revenue model attached to it? I think my questions are, one, how soon are you ready to hire, and when would you need people, and what type of people would you need? And two, what would be a convenient price model or fee model for you to pay a recruiting service, for example, or have you used external agencies in the past, or was it mainly the recruiting team for the foundation that supported with recruiting the Oracle's team?
Yeah, so I mean, in the past, I've used all kinds of stuff. We've used external services, we've used in-house recruiters. We've used, like I said, just finding people at crypto conferences where we're just like, these guys are, how the hell would we ever find these guys, out in the wild, hit the jackpot here. But yeah, no, I'm open to using anything that brings results, right? So whether that is a recruitment based kind of core unit or a kind of a team and incubation, that we have internal to the DAO, whether that's an external recruiter. I'm whatever gets the results, right? And in terms of what the fee structure would look like, I mean, with externals, right? Those are all negotiated individually. With internals, I think that's probably something for the DAO to decide, right? So I've allocated budget, right, for doing recruiting, right? And I don't personally, I don't care if that money gets sent external to the DAO or just gets moved around to some other core unit within the DAO. I just need to be transparent on my side of what this is going to cost. I would probably say that in terms of the structure, the pricing structure for something internal to the DAO, that's probably something that should just be in your proposal. For the DAO itself, when you're trying to get funding, is saying, this is what we're going to charge people, right? And I don't know if you guys are basically a private entity taking profit, or if all your money just comes from DAO funding, or if there's some kind of performance-based thing, right? I'm not in the recruiting sphere, right? So I leave that big problem up to you, and I'm happy to go along with whatever the DAO ratifies.
Got it. Thanks for your input there. And I think, yeah, the question on our side is as well, when you have 4 to 5 core units, it's easy to establish a team for that, which can be subsidized by the DAO. But if Maker would reach 100, 200 core units within the next year, it would be difficult to scale the recruiting team according to the specific needs. So I'm just juggling with ideas here. What are some type of profiles that the type of people that could work in the Oracle's core unit? Is it mainly smart contract engineers? Are you also looking for other types of people or hats?
If you go on the Maker forum, there should be a MIP 39C2 for the Oracle's core unit, and that has the exact kind of team structure that we are anticipating to have. That's how we arrived at this 15.5 kind of number. And so you'll see it's primarily engineering focused. So, we want some full stack developers, we want some smart contract developers. We'll want a couple more backend services developers. So backend developers, right? We kind of need to find someone who will kind of serve as the BD and / marketing person at the start, someone who will serve as the kind of operations / accounting person at the start, a part-time lawyer, which I think I have a pretty good grasp on there, right? But you'll find the exact positions and the seniority and the amounts for each position listed in the core unit proposal itself that you can find on the forum.
Appreciate it, and sorry for going off topic with this. Thanks for the guidance.
Any other questions before we close? I think we're a little bit past the hour, so. Regarding the timelines, Nick, when can we expect this to be in formal submission?
As soon as the governance processes let me do that, which
Sounds
I believe
good.
is like I think the earliest that it can be voted on is in the June MIP bundle. So the earliest I could get access to the funds would be, it sounds like beginning July, mid-July, something like that. So that's kind of the timeline that I'm working with.
Great. And where can people find more information about you, contact you, stalk you?
Yeah, I'm at Nick on the Rocket Chat. I'm Nomos Paradox on Twitter. I think Nick Kunkel on the Maker forum. You can Find me.
That's good. Thank you, Nika and Marc-Andre, for being with us. And thanks everyone else for joining.
Thanks, guys. Nice seeing you. Bye.